Hey, Tom here, FlipAnything USA. So today we're going to review Ken McElroy's latest video, Real Estate in 2023, Pencils Down, Bro. So, Ken comes from a different background of real estate than I do. From what I understand, he's always been part of a bigger machine. In other words, he's been part of a group. He's had his designation of what he does, whether it be a scout or a buyer, or and I'm not sure exactly. But from what I've seen, he hasn't been so much of an individual buying one property at a time and starting. He started out in a group, or primarily started out in a group with others. I think Robert Kiyosaki he's attached to in some fashion. Anyways, let's watch this video. I'm curious what he has to say. I just watched maybe the first 30 seconds. Don't know that I'm going to agree with what he says or not, but it's worth a review. Ken seems like a nice enough guy. I don't know that I'm going to agree with him, but let's take a watch. All right. Hey, so look, those of you that have just got here, my name's Tom McKay. I've been investing in real estate for over 41 years. Started when I was 19 years old. I was a millionaire back in the 80s, back in when I was 27 years old. It took me about 8 years from the time I got into real estate to make my first million. So, at that point, I sold my company that I had, and because I didn't need it anymore. It was just a cabinet shop. Didn't make as much money as I did as an investor. And I've been an investor ever since, and what I like is to show people my lifestyle, what I do. I felt like I've never worked a day in my life. I mean, sure, I've had ups and downs, but overall, I mean, I've lived a life of pleasure in doing what I like to do best. I've got a book, Wake Up and Smell the Real Estate. Be sure to get this book. It's the best $10-20 you'll ever spend. People will spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 on some fake guru bullshit, and not even learn a fraction of what they could have learned with a $10 book. So urge you to get that. Let's go ahead and get this started with Ken, and let's go.
Real estate right now and even potentially in 2023.
Just so everybody knows, I'm playing him at 1.5 times speed. I think you can understand him fine. I tend to do that. I'll play videos a little higher speed so we can rip through it quicker. Let's watch.
So I'm titling this one, Pencils Down, Bro, because I was meeting with a couple friends of mine and investment bankers, and I said, what are you guys doing right now? And they all said, pencils down. And what does that mean? Well, you remember when you were in school, at the end of a test, you would put the pencil down, that meant stop. So a lot of investment bankers and a lot of underwriters right now are settling down to watch to see what the market's going to do. And stick around because I got 3 things that I want you to watch. So reason number 1, for those of you who don't think so, prices are correcting in real estate, both in residential and in commercial. Mostly what people watch are residential. And as you can see from this article, among the country's 400 biggest housing markets, 219 have already seen home values fall off their 2022 peak, which was in June of this year. On the commercial.
Yeah, so look, that's going to happen. I mean, I've got 2 houses I've sold this month. Just in the last week, I've sold 2 houses. One of them I only bought just a couple months ago. So I bought during this downturn. 3 houses I bought in the last, while we've been going in this downturn and interest rates going up. Listen, I'm somebody that says you never stop investing, but you be very selective about what you buy. You always have to buy based relative to what prices are today. So this idea of pencils down, like nobody buy anything. I mean that, Sue Zorman, these people that talk to people that have no common sense, for people that have no common sense, they probably shouldn't do anything most of the time. But for an investor, you should never stop investing. There is no bad real estate. There's just bad deals. Always make a good deal, and you can always make money. And you can see the houses that I just bought here in the last couple months, and I have videos on it. And I'll show the ones that I just sold. Again, I'm making money in a downturn, and you can too. But let's keep watching.
Commercial side, specifically multifamily, we are seeing up to 20% decreases in pricing from 1 year ago.
So look, it's interesting. I do agree with him on this. It says, rest in peace, multifamily deals. You guys, if you get a chance, watch the video that I did on Ryan Pineda. Ryan Pineda has started a fund, and he doesn't have that much experience. I mean, he's a real estate agent, and maybe he's done well at that. I don't even know. But I haven't seen him to be much of a savvy investor that I can tell. But he puts on that persona. But he bought, in my opinion, at the worst possible time. And what's even more frightening for other people, I think, is that he's doing a fund. And with the fund, you're basically using other people's money. You know, you can spend other people's money and really piss it away, and they get hurt, but you don't because you've spent their money, not your own. That's really the true test of a good investor, somebody that has a track record of spending their own money and making a lot of money. You know, nobody should be trusted to spend other people's money until they've proven that. I don't think that Ryan has yet, but, you know, I don't know everything about him. But Grant Cardone, by the way, man, he's opened up a big can of worms. We're going to get into that later this week, too. But multifamily is definitely going down. Everything's going down to a degree because everything's based on higher interest rates. Interest rates go up, property values go down. But right now, it's really tough in the multifamily area because anything you bought today that pencils, it's not going to pencil at the same price for anybody else because they have to borrow the money at so much higher of a rate. So let's keep watching and see what Ken has to say.
There should be no disputing that we have falling prices right now in most markets. And so a lot of you are going to be saying, well, in my market, prices are still going up, and that might be true, but I'm going to show you why you might want to be careful into 2023. So let's first start with the facts and why I think you should have pencils down at the moment. So what's clear is the housing market is in a downturn. It peaked in June of 2022. This is the S&P Case-Shiller U.S. Home Price Index, and that's reached over 318 points in the National Association of Realtors. They're all saying, and we all know, that the median house price has moved down in the United States. The major reason, of course, is...
So look, he's looking at big data as far as going all the way across the USA. I tell people all the time, listen, there's some things that affect us worldwide or statewide or, you know, USA-wide, and that is interest rates, okay, for sure. But a lot of times you can be in a particular area that's doing extremely well for whatever particular reason. You know, it could be the industry that's going on. You know, there's a lot of this green garbage that got passed by the government that's already slated and paid for. It's in this omnibus bill. You know, they're going to piss so much money away, you know, forcing this green, you know, initiative that there's a lot of people going to make a ton of money in that area because the government's paying for it. They're printing money and paying for it. So all I'm trying to say is, you can have a booming economy in one state and everything else is dead in the surrounding states because of what's going on in that particular state. So just keep that in mind. My economy, I can tell you, is primarily 15 square miles or a radius of 15 miles. That's where I own the bulk of my properties, and that's what I'm affected most by. And I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on locally. Of course, interest rates is something I have to consider, but only if I intend to resell, how it affects me on the buyer that's going to buy from me, or what I'm going to buy, how it's going to affect me on my bottom line by the spread that I'm going to make on the borrowed money and the cap rate on whatever I buy. So we'll keep watching.
It's a steady climb in mortgage interest rates fueled by the Federal Reserve's decision to raise multiple times across 2022. They've raised 6 times since March, and we barely tackled inflation, which is their highest priority. So, of course, rising mortgage rates equate to less interest from homebuyers and greater pressure on sellers to reduce their prices. So right now, there's a huge difference between bid and ask, and that's what's happening at the moment. Rising borrowing costs, of course, reflect slower sales, which, of course, reflect housing price.
So look, I'm going to tell everybody right now, if you're in a position where you're thinking you're going to sell right now, and if you don't have my book already, get my book, okay? This costs you $10. I think you can get it on Kindle and be reading it right now. You can read part of it for free. Just go to Amazon.com, or get the paperback. I think it's $20. It'll be the best money you ever spent. There's a chapter in there, I think chapter 24. It's called Leapfrogging. Very relevant to anybody right now that intends to sell. You got an asset you need to get rid of. Get my book and read that as quick as you can. It could make a huge difference in whether you sink or swim.
And as you can see from Zillow, Redfin, and all the people who are reporting, there's thousands and thousands of deals that were called off nationally in various months as a result of all of this happening.
Yeah, so I did a video on this actually a couple months back where basically at the time, 15% of all deals that had been initiated were falling out. In other words, 15% of everything that opened up where people agreed to buy was falling out, and then pretty soon it went up to 20, I think 22, and probably up to 30% now. But we're actually getting to a point now where people just, there's less players, which to me as an investor, it's an advantage because now it's just the pros playing. And so there's less people to come in there and muck it up. So let's keep watching.
happening. So why is all this happening? It's happening because of the higher borrowing costs. As you know, the higher the borrowing cost, the less the cash flow. And I'm specifically talking about investment real estate. So if you're using borrowed money to buy investment real estate, one of the factors facing everyone right now is what is the cost of borrowing today and what is it going to be in 2023? What we're experiencing right now is there's a big lag between what the seller is going to sell for and what the buyer is willing to pay. So these rising mortgage rates equate to less interest from the home buyers and greater pressure on the seller to reduce prices. So that's what's happening now, because those same houses cost the buyer more because their mortgage payment is more. Higher borrowing costs affect cash flow negatively, which make the buyer offer less to the seller.
Okay, and so this is actually exactly why you should not be a bit afraid to buy right now. And I'll tell you why. If you can, as an investor, if you can buy something right now and you're borrowing money at, say, roughly 3% higher than you were borrowing it for, say, 6-8 months ago when interest rates were about 3% less, if you can make it pencil based on today's rates, you're fine. Because this is what doesn't really matter. When values go down, say, like I just sold a house for I sold it for $415, then we renegotiated after the fact. I took off money for a roof. I sold it for, just signed the papers a little bit ago, for $403. I did an amendment to drop it down a little bit, no problem. I paid a $303 for it. I know I paid $297 for it, sold it for $403, and it's only been about 6-8 months. And, I maybe put $30,000-$40,000 in it. So I'm going to make $60,000-$70,000 on it. And I got another one I bought for $300 that I just sold for $369, I think. And there's some realtor's costs and stuff. I'm still going to make $25,000 on the deal. But it's because I bought it right. It didn't matter that we're in a downturn. I bought it cheaper. Those houses would have sold for more, or the last one would have certainly sold for more than I paid for it if I paid full retail. But I bought it far enough under that I can sell it for under retail and still make money. That's always your hedge, is buy under market. That way you have options to get rid of it. You can leapfrog, like chapter 24. You can do the things that you need to do and still make money.
So that's what's happening right now. And there's a lag right now between the sellers and the buyers on the bid and the ask. So there should be no question that the reason that sales are down in real estate, and they have been down over the last 6 months, is a result of these higher borrowing costs. As the Federal Chair Powell has indicated, and as the Federal Reserve has indicated, we're going to see another increase here in December, which could potentially drive prices even lower. As you can see from the detail here, Federal Reserve Powell confirmed just last Wednesday that the small...
Yeah, and he's right. Powell was so late to raise interest rates. He should have raised interest rates probably a year earlier, but he didn't. And sometimes politics play into this stuff, but he was really late at getting on there and raising the rates. And so he's having to do it like a hockey stick. The rates are going up. So anyways, yeah, so they are going to continue, agreed. I think it's going to be another 0.5 point here in December because it's not affecting the market well enough. Now we're starting to see a lot of layoffs. You're starting to see a lot more layoffs in the investment, employment area, and the big guys that have large staff. Merrill Lynch, I think, just announced 10,000 or 10% layoffs. So a lot of stuff's going on, and it will drive the prices down, but that's okay. It's terrible if you bought something and you need to get rid of it, and now it's worth less than what you just paid for it. That can happen. I'm not in that position. People in my mentorship, which I have a mentorship, by the way, you should take a look at. In fact, this is a good moment here. Let's jump to this real quick, and then I'll come back.
Don't stop and listen. Time is on a mission to eliminate all the snake oil and the fake gurus that fake y'all. He'll show you how to build an empire, starting with nothing but a desire. All you really need is a good mentor, not a used car bullshit. With time, you'll learn to crush it. Investing like Warren Buffett. With real estate, you cannot procrastinate. Everyone who hesitates is left at the starting gate. Hey, yo, so don't delay and join today. The mentorship and flip anything. USA, go.
All right. Hey, also, by the way, at this moment, why don't you take a moment to hit that subscribe button? I promise you'll learn a lot from me. I've been doing this a very long time. I do have a mentorship. I don't just take anybody. In fact, half the people that call, I tell them, don't bother right now. Nicely. I'll put them off. I try to pick the best and brightest people, and that's why if you look at the testimonials at FlipAnythingUSA.com, you'll see I have guys that have made multiple millions of dollars, $1 million, $2 million, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, many people making really good money. For the first time, men have more money in their hands than they've been able to save in the last 30 years. And I have a lot of real estate agents in my class that have been doing it for years as well. I've been doing it for a very long time, and I've been very successful at it. You'll definitely learn a lot. So hit that subscribe button. Let's continue on with this. And like I say, you should. There is no bad property. There's just bad deals. That's what I'm going to leave you with at the moment. Let's keep watching.
Real estate increases are likely ahead and could start in December, and that's where we are today. But he cautioned that the policy is likely to stay restrictive for some time until real signs of progress emerge on inflation. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So here's what I believe is going to happen in 2023. I believe that interest rates are not only going to be increased in December, but I believe that they're going to be increased in many of the Fed meetings. And why do I think this? I think this because on the Federal Reserve's own website, you can see that their mandate is that they're targeting 2% inflation. And the Fed is, of course, in charge of maximum employment and inflation, and their target is 2%. So in every single one of the rate increases that we've had since March of this year, they've had unanimous consent. It has not even been contentious at the committee level. So here are the inflation figures from 2020, 21, and 2022. And as you can see, this is a very interesting, and you can see that the Federal Reserve did a pretty good job up until about March of 2021 on keeping that inflation rate right around the 2% mark, which of course is their mandate. So as you can see, most of this inflation started about a year after the pandemic. And of course, at the 4.2 and the 5, the 5.4, that's when Jerome Powell came out and said, inflation is supposed to be transitory. Well, now we can see that it hasn't been transitory, and it seems to be here for a while. So there are many people that believe that the Federal Reserve waited too long, but as you can see, each and every month, it just kept continuing to creep up. And it wasn't until March of 2022 when they first started to increase the federal funds rate.
Yeah, they were really late at getting on this, and that's why things are so screwed up. And all the stimulus, to be honest, all the stimulus money the government gave away, it's like everybody got a participation trophy. Everybody got a check whether they needed it or not. The government should have just gave money to the people that needed money, not everybody. It was everybody that made under $60,000 a year, whether they were working or not. It shouldn't have gone to the people that were working. It should have gone to the people that needed, that were out of a job, that couldn't work. And so you got a lot of people that got a bunch of cash that they didn't expect to have. They started spending money. They started spending it frivolously. And a lot of them didn't go back to work, which further threw things into a mess. That's why it's you can see that we're having a hard time filling jobs, even still today. It's just surprising how many people are on some sort of government welfare of some sort, and it is damaging the country. And that's why I always tell everybody, your best hedge against a poorly run government is make money. Make money. You know what I mean? Just make some money. And that's what I try to teach people to do. So we'll go back to this. The CPI, the Consumer Price Index, is something that, investors like myself or landlords like myself will attach that onto the leases. You even do it in residential leases now. I used to just do it on commercial, industrial, and, type of clients. But in other words, and that's been up to like 8%. Normally that's about 1.5 to 2%, which is basically the inflation rate. It allows us to, if we put it in our contract, it allows us to adjust the rents up according to that consumer price index, which is inflation. And it's an important thing to have in there. But I can tell you, as a landlord, I haven't even been able to pull the trigger on that. I mean, I have triple net leases, and I'll raise people's rent based on passing the tax burden, the value. If the taxes go up on me, I let them pay their proportionate amount, of their proportionate amount of the building. But I haven't even had the heart to pass on something I could impose on them. I could pass this consumer price index on my tenants and raise their rents, but it's ridiculous. I'm not going to raise people's rent 8% on top of raising the taxes because they keep reevaluating and raising the values of my portfolio. So let's keep watching.
Rate by almost 0.75%, and they've done that for each of their meetings up to this point. Here's the problem. In all of this, we're still at 7.7% inflation, and we really haven't moved off of what the inflation number was even before the increases at the beginning of 2022. So what this means to me is that the Fed is still going to continue to raise rates, and which will also increase.
Agreed. They are going to keep raising the rates. They're going to raise them until that trends down, and maybe it falls in there around maybe 3 or 4%. And listen, when I started in 1981, bought my first piece of property, I think it was 1981, interest rates were like 12, 13% at the bank. In fact, I was doing owner finance deals, which is something really, you want to get my book for that reason alone. Get my book for that reason alone. There are opportunities to borrow, and there's going to be opportunities for people to make deals that couldn't make deals otherwise through owner financing. The money's getting so expensive at the bank that now people like you and me, if we have extra money in the bank, we can actually compete with the banks, because why are you going to put your money in the bank and get 1.5%, 2% 3%, whatever, when you can loan it to somebody at, 7, 8%, and be competitive with the banks. So let's keep watching.
Increase the borrowing costs, which should also reduce the prices of real estate in the short term and potentially in the long term, certainly through 2023. So in 2023, I still believe that inflation is going to still be a factor in the economy, and the Fed is going to use their tools by raising the federal funds rate in these meetings here. How much they raise will be yet to be determined, but they will definitely be focused on this inflation rate and trying to get it down to that target rate of 2%. So I estimate that we're going to have even higher borrowing costs in 2023. If the past is any prediction of the future, we already know that the interest rate increases have increased the borrowing costs, which have lowered the prices of real estate so far. And if this continues, and I do believe that it will, my prediction is that we are going to still continue to see real estate prices go down throughout 2023. How much will depend on what the Fed does, obviously, in 2023, and more importantly, where inflation goes, which nobody will know at this point. As always, I like to shine a positive light on some of these things. So what are the 4 things that you could be doing in 2023? What are the things?
So before he gets into that, look, this is just pretty much common sense, and I don't disagree with what he just said. This is just how it works. Interest rates go up. Listen, most consumers, they don't care about how much they pay. When you say how much can you afford, they say, this much a month. They don't even think about what they're paying for, which is horrible thinking. And I try to correct that thinking with my students. When somebody says how much, it's how much is it worth? How much am I paying for it? How much can I resell it for and make a profit? Those are the things. You got to know value. If you know value, you can make a fortune in real estate. But if you're a consumer spender, and when somebody says how much, and you just think in terms of how much of a payment you can afford, then that's kind of like a very foolish move, and you don't want to be that guy. So he's 100% correct. The Fed's going to keep raising the rate till they lower inflation. When you see inflation drop, that's when the Fed will stop raising the rates and the dust will settle. Many people upside down, many people upside down in the funds that they've invested in and in the properties that they purchased on their own. You're going to see it all the time. I've seen, tract homes. First phase sells for 120, second phase sells for maybe 170, and now people are feeling great. Oh man, my property's worth so much more. Then they get to the third phase and then maybe start to get in trouble like we are now. Then that third phase, pretty soon the development company is now selling those homes in the third phase that we're selling at 220, say, are now selling them for less than they sold in the second phase at 150 or 170, and then things get worse, and now they're selling off the rest of the property for less than they sold it for originally at 120. That stuff can happen. I've seen it happen, and that's very likely to happen. Now, the good news about that is, as an investor, if you're smart and you watch yourself and you're careful with your investments and everything you buy and sell makes sense and you make your money and you keep your money in hand, not just save. I'm not saying don't buy. You always buy, but you always buy under market so you make a money. You always have to keep making money. But then you have the advantage of taking advantage of the crumbs that fall apart at the bank, the stuff that goes back to the bank. They sell it at a loss. You pick it up. I mean, it's a vicious circle. But you want to be the wolf eating, not the sheep getting gobbled up. Let's keep watching.
That you can watch, and what are the things that you can do? The first one is that you need to be watching some of these foreign buyers as they come into the United States because of our strong dollar. This has happened before because foreign investors will look for the U.S. to park their dollars because the economy is strong. So this is something that you need to watch.
I don't know why we need to watch that. I'll be honest. There's nothing you can do about it. If foreign buyers come in and start buying and the values go up, what are you going to do about it? If it's going down, what are you going to do about it? I mean, you can try to anticipate everything, but like I say, watching the economy that's immediately around you is probably the most important thing, and seeing what values are doing and what the industry is and who's working. It might be in a capital city where there's just a flood of government work and they're going to keep printing money, keeping those people working. And so there's always going to be economy based on those people that are getting a paycheck, because their paycheck isn't based on products selling. It's government. It's bureaucracy. It ain't going nowhere. It's going to continue. Let's keep watching.
Second thing is you can acquire properties with fixed debt. So in other words, debt is now an asset. You can actually minimize your borrowing costs by buying somebody else's debt if you can on an assumable basis. A lot of debt is assumable. So think of it as you stepping into somebody else's shoes. So somebody has a 3% loan on some property somewhere. That is an asset right now. Of course, interest rates are in the 6 and 7% range. And so that is a great way to still buy real estate. You do have to come.
Yeah, if you can assume somebody's low interest note, then that's obviously a possibility. But, I can tell you, in generally, unless it was an owner finance created note, it's going to have an alienation clause. All banks have alienation clauses in their paperwork, meaning when the property changes hands, it triggers it triggers a sale. In other words, they can call the note due, and you have to pay it all. You can do a wrap, we call an all-inclusive trust deed, where maybe you owe a first and a second. Now you sell it to somebody else in an all-inclusive trust deed, and so they pay you, and then you pay that. And believe me, my first property that I bought had 5. It was a wraparound. They call that a wraparound as well, by the way, where there was 5 trust deeds wrapped in the one that was created to sell me the property. And that's for another story, but we'll keep watching.
Come up with more equity, however, but that debt is now an asset. I did a video on this. You need to focus on your operational expenses and your income for 2023. This year is going to be primary and going to be one of the things that's going to flush out a lot of bad operators. And make sure that you have plenty of cash reserves. The last thing, if you are investing...
So I'm going to say something to that. And this is one of the reasons I can't stand fake gurus or people that have a high opinion of their capacity with really no basis. Anybody in the last 10 years could buy property and the values go up. I mean, everybody's a rock star in good times. Everybody feels like a rock star in good times. But the fact is, until you've been tested, until you've seen how bad things can be. I started in a recession, basically, in the early 80s, and I've seen some, mini recessions or, in between things, some tough times, things happen. But people that have never seen hard times don't know how to cope with it, don't know how to deal with it. And they make foolish moves like create a fund and buy a bunch of crap. And now they're upside down and now they're stuck. So, or just individually it happens too.
Investing, you want to make sure that you do not have a defined exit. So what that means is a defined exit is if a loan is maturing. So let's say you have a loan maturing in 2023 and the rate is say 3 or 4%. You're going to be in trouble because you either have to sell that property to a buyer who has to get a higher price loan, or you might have to refinance and you're going to have a higher price loan. The next thing is
and that's the trap that I was describing earlier is so a lot of banks, they don't like to do, I've got loans that are 10, 15 years out. In other words, I didn't accept that they want to bump the prices in 5 years. I've got loans that are 10 years, 15 years. Asset will be paid off by then, or I'll sell it, or who knows what I'll do. But the bottom line is, what he's saying is true. If you've got the kind of loans that in 5 years you've agreed that the bank will reassess and adjust the market to market rate or what they consider market rate at that time, then you could very well be doomed. They could create a situation that you're not going to be able to get out of. Unless things get so bad, that when the bank triggers that, rather than foreclose on you, they just say, oh, you know what, we'll suck it up and we'll eat it. And that can happen too. The banks don't want real estate back. They're in the business making money on borrowed money, on the money they loan out. They're the worst managers of property. Believe me, I've seen stuff handled by banks. They pissed it away, just unbelievable messes. So the bank does not want your property back. In fact, they get in trouble with the government for having too much money or having too much real estate on the books. The foreclosures don't look good on banks. It looks like they made poor decisions in who they lent to. So, but it is a real thing that can happen. But ideally, things go to market like that. They go under. The bank marks it down, and guys like me come in and we buy it for a fraction of what it cost. And believe me, I bought an apartment building that cost over $1.2 million. It dropped to $770, sold, went back to the bank, again from that buyer at $550, went back to the bank again after that sale of $550. I came in and I bought it for $340. 5 years later, I sold it for $1.8 million, made almost $1.5 million on it. So stuff happens.
Managed equity, you might be sitting behind that managed equity, and that equity is going to want their money back, and it might not be an opportunistic time for you to sell based on the current market conditions when we're starting to see some of these prices go down. The third thing that affects me personally are what I would call rising capitalization rates or cap rates. Cap rates are rising because interest rates are rising. And if you have a defined exit and your cap rate is actually going up, then you might not be able to get out of this property, and all that hard work that you put in before is going to be compromised because of the higher cap rates. So these are all the things that you need to take care of.
Yeah, so if you didn't follow that, what he's saying is, let's say you have a property that has a cap rate of 6% and you owe 3/4 of it. Just say you put 25% down, and let's say it's a $4 million bill and you put $1 million down. Now you got $3 million that you owe money on, and you're paying say 3.5%. You got a loan at the perfect time. This 5-year call's coming, and the bank's going to come back and say, okay, we're adjusting your interest rate now up to 6.5% or 6% or 7%, who knows. Now, you're already locked in to having that thing at a 6 cap based on what the asset was worth when you bought it. And now the interest rates have gone up on you, and now the money that you were borrowing, that you had a, maybe a 2.5% delta, the spread that you were making the money on, that's gone, that's evaporated. In fact, now maybe not only are you not making that spread, you're actually negative 0.5% on 3/4 of the value of that property. But it's even worse now because the money is so expensive, it's devalued your property. Somebody's going to want to buy from you, and they may want a 9 cap so they can make a 2% spread over borrowing money at 7%. And that's where, and he says he's concerned with that. I think that's primarily maybe because he's involved with, he's a smaller piece of a big picture with other partners. I don't know for a fact, but it sounds like Ken does big joint ventures with other people. That's not my bag. I don't like it. I like to hold the reins. I like having control on selling my assets. The people that jump in these funds, hand their money to somebody else, they're stuck. They get upside down. They're not going to see their money for 10, 12 years, maybe never. You never know what's going to happen. Hate to terrify you guys, but it's true. Anyways, let's let Ken finish up here. So far, good job, Ken.
Care of before the interest rates continue to go up, and I believe that they will. And of course, the borrowing costs continue to go up. If you have some kind of variable or some kind of bridge loan, you're definitely getting killed on the cash flow. And that's why these cash reserves and all these things are important to look at right now and start to recapitalize or make some decisions on what you're going to do for 2023, because I don't see this getting any better into next year. And it's really the best time, I believe, to just put your pencils down and let everything work itself out.
Tim Roth said there's no way.
So listen, this pencil down stuff of just, and I'm, with all due respect to Ken, I don't believe in pencils down, ever, okay? If you don't know what you're doing, you probably should never even touch things anyways. But it is a great time to get skills, watch the market carefully, and pounce on opportunities. You'll see, don't be afraid to make lowball offers. And when I say lowball offer, in other words, you can still assess what values are worth, even if a property that's worth $1 million, and let's just say, say 6 months ago, and now, that property's selling for about $800,000. If you can buy that thing for $500,000, $300 based on what it is worth today, jump on it and then turn it and burn it for $700,000 and make $200,000. That stuff happens. In fact, one of my students, this is a good example. He had a property that he figured was worth about $1.2 million, a year ago, and now it just came up on the market and it was at $750,000, and not enough people were moving on it. There was a lot of interest in it but people are still shell shocked by the interest rates going up. Well, the seller got concerned, and she went and marked it down from the $750,000 down to $550,000. And that very day that she marked it down and put it up for $550,000, was anticipating offers coming in, this great new price, $200,000 less. One of my students came in and said, "Look, I'll give you $350,000." And the agent said, "Oh, no, they're not going to take that." And guess what? They took it. The agent couldn't even believe it. And believe me, that's what happens. That's been in my experience. Believe me, I have had this throughout my whole life. People will say, the agents are like, "Well, hey, you got a really good deal. You kind of owe me one." I go, "No, you don't owe me. I don't owe you nothing. You could have bought that property. You didn't have the guts or the balls or the money to put out front to try to buy that." But that's the kind of things that can happen, is that even though she just marked it down $200,000, she took another $200,000 off. And that's the same day that she made the price adjustment. And he's sitting fat, and now, he's fixing this thing up. He's probably going to turn it and make, maybe $300,000 or $400,000, maybe more. But, or just sit on it and take the cash flow because he's got a nice income, because he's got an asset that would have brought a 6 cap on roughly $1 million, say $60,000 a year net. And now he's got that coming in on a $350,000 investment. It's a fantastic thing. Hey, again, good job, Ken, on making this. I don't agree with everybody on anything ever. I'm always generally disagreeable, but he did a good job. Again, folks, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. You saw earlier, I've got a book, Wake Up and Smell the Real Estate. It's a no-brainer. You should buy that, I promise you. I'm going to just kill it from here and say thanks for watching. Do you know what a real estate barbell is? Well, you should hang out and find out, because it can make you millions of dollars if you understand how to create one. Real estate barbell is basically when you buy your own home and then you start investing and buying the properties around your home, and then you start investing and buying the properties all around your office or work or your place of business. And then eventually you start buying what's in between. I bought all around my home, and then I bought all around my office and everywhere in between, and you're about to see how you can do the same.